Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
You know, we deal in frameworks and models often here at Personality Hacker. We use a lot of frameworks and models that we've picked up, we've learned on our own, and then we've taught them. And one of the things that we've come up with, sometimes just in the course of conversation, because when you deal with frameworks and models, you can oftentimes come up with little frameworks to make distinctions around things that don't have distinctions. So we were talking a little while back about how people show up to the world managing the activities they do and the things they possess and the money, the expendable money they have in their lives to put toward those things and experiences. And we came up with a little tiny framework around this that we call the Lifestyler versus Homesteader framework. And we want to talk about that today because we think it's a great framework for you to have as well to start seeing resource, money, activity, and the things in your life, the possessions you own, have a little framework for how you categorize that. And also, it can be helpful in some of the conflicts that might arise for how, you're married to somebody, they might see things differently than you. So it can help you understand some of the conflict that might arise and some of the ways you can get on the same page or accommodate each other in this. So we think this is a really cool little framework to teach you today it hasn't been scientifically researched, but we really think there's some things here and there's some value that you can get as a listener from understanding this.
Right. So again, it's a little model. Actually, Joel is being generous when he says we came up with it. You actually came up with it, Joel. And it's a way of understanding how we prioritize our discretionary resource. So our discretionary time and our discretionary money. And as Joel mentions, he calls it the Lifestyler versus the Homesteader model. And so lifestylers are people who want experiences in life. They enjoy what they're doing more than what they're owning. Travel, different restaurants, different different styles of recreation. Those are things that are very important to them. And so when they have money, discretionary time and discretionary money, they have a tendency to throw it at experiences, what they're doing. Homesteaders, on the other hand, are people who naturally gravitate towards nesting, toward building a safe environment and home. It's more about what they're owning, not necessarily in a materialistic way, just like experiences can also, they may or may not be a sign of materialism. Homesteading may or may not be a sign of materialism, but it's more about putting your discretionary time and income into your homestead or the place that you're nesting. So on the weekends, instead of maybe going out and doing something, you're at home doing DIY projects. And all of the money you have, the discretionary money, or maybe not all of it, but a big portion of it goes into maybe paying off your mortgage or in improvements in your home. And it feels like people have a tendency to gravitate toward one or the other of these. Now, obviously, if you have ridiculous amounts of money, you get to have both if you want. But most people don't have enough money to throw endless resource at both things. So most of the time we have to choose one or the other. And depending upon the one that we're the most attracted to, that's the one we're going to naturally gravitate toward. And as Joel mentioned, one of the reasons why this is important to self-identify and maybe identify with, say, your spouse or your pair bond partner or the people in your life is that they may have very different values than you do. They might, you're in a relationship with somebody and they're a homesteader and you're a lifestyler and they want to put all their time and money into the house and you want to go do stuff. So you're in a restaurant and you see this, $30 bottle of wine on the menu and you just have to you have to have it. And your spouse is like, why on earth would you do that? Like we could buy that for half the price in a wine store later and recoup that money and put it towards our mortgage or put it towards something that that we're building together. And of course, the lifestyler is going to look at the person and go, yeah, but I want it now because I'm in this great restaurant. I've got this, I've got the wonderful lighting. I've got this delicious meal that was prepared, by somebody else. And I just want the pairing of the bottle of wine. So now you've got some tension. Now you've got some conversation that's coming up, maybe some argument that comes up around why each person is allocating hard-won resource to something that the other person simply doesn't understand.
Now, we're talking in a general sense. Obviously, we have both of these in our lives. Most of us have a little bit of homesteading. We all want a place to lay our head at night and have a little nest that we can go back to. And all of us want somewhat to have experiences. We want to have that experience of going to that 2-week vacation every year, or go out to eat on a regular basis maybe and have those experiences. So there's both of these represented in all of us, but we're probably going to skew on our fundamental wiring, how we're wired, and it might have to do with some personality typology, but it also just has to do with our upbringing, other things. We're going to probably have a tendency to lean more toward one versus the other in general terms as our wiring. Now, the other thing that comes into account here are generations. So what generation you're born of. Like my grandparents' generation had a lot more homesteaders because they lived through the Great Depression and World War II. And so they were wired at a young age to be homesteaders because there wasn't a lot of resource to go around. And that was the mentality of that time period. And the millennials now are very lifestyle focused. There's a lot of resource to go around. They're all into digital technology. And so lifestyle skews generationally.
Yeah, didn't you read an article that said that the wine industry is having this ridiculous boom?
Oh,
because
millennials are drinking so much wine, they're changing the wine industry. The entire industry is shifting because so much wine is all of a sudden being consumed.
Right. And so some of this comes into generation as well. I mean, obviously. Go ahead.
I was going to just mention the one last modifier is their seasons of life. So like right now, you and I, Antonia, are very much in a homesteading time period of our lives. We'd rather be out traveling probably and doing lifestyle stuff, but we have a 4-year-old child. And so by definition of the season of life we're in, we have to be more homesteading and pull upon that part of us, even though our natural wiring is probably more lifestyle. Yeah. That's all I wanted to say before you went on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's definitely going to, I mean, it may skew one towards the other based on, your context and circumstances in your life. Like you said, the season of your life. And I would imagine that as with most things, this isn't a toggle switch. It's not on off. Like you mentioned, we have a little bit of each. And it's probably a sliding scale. I can imagine that some people might be really polarized on one side or the other. I mean, I know people who have like literally never left a 60-mile radius from their house. Though travel is incredibly easy to procure in the United States, they've never left a 60-mile radius.
They own a car. They can totally do it. They just haven't.
Yeah, because it's just not interesting to them. But they've poured everything into their house. And that's their joy is to be home with their family. And they go all out for maybe holidays or just events, and they just really love being home. And then I know people on the other side that who could afford a house but simply have chosen not to have one. They want to be constantly traveling. And so their home is maybe, I don't know, like a tiny little apartment, and they spend all of their money in world travel or in, different major life experiences. So there are definitely people on opposite sides of the polarity, but I would say that most people fall someplace in between. Like you and I are both lifestylers. We definitely gravitate towards experiences. And we've noticed that we spend a lot of money on experiences. Like a big portion of our discretionary income goes towards just having a new experience, just figuring, just having something novel in our life, or we've got a lot of stuff on our bucket list and we just want to try. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had always wanted to eat escargot, and I finally did. And I'm like, cool, that's off my bucket list. And it was just really important for me to have escargot at some point in my life. And so I think what's nice about you and I is that we share that, but there have been moments lately where I've been kind of getting a bit of a homesteader feel. I'm like, ooh, I think I want to kind of invest a little bit of money in the home. And it's probably my FE tertiary coming out, my extroverted feeling 10-year-old wanting to have a bit of a nest. And like you said, we have a 4-year-old and I have 2 step kids. You have 2 kids from a previous marriage. Want a little bit of more space in the house, maybe have something a little more comfortable for, say, being hospitable to other people or being able to host people. But and that's been a source of conversation for us, because that is not something that's on your mind at all.
Yeah, I'd get rid of the current place we live in some like little 1-bedroom just to crash our stuff and be on the road the whole time, like all the time.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I totally understand the pull of that. But you and I have noticed that we've had some conversations around that, and because we've both traditionally been such lifestylers and ignored the homesteading piece completely, I've been feeling some drain. I've been feeling almost taxed by the schedule that being a lifestyler has put upon us. Because, we run a business and we've got kids and there's a lot to do. And with lifestyling, that means that, we're buying tickets to different places, plane tickets very often, and we have to figure out the logistics of travel, and we've got to figure out, being a lifestyler is a little more complicated, it feels.
Everywhere you go, you have to set up the systems to take care of the things you need taken care of.
Right.
And usually those are easy when it's just two people maybe, or one person. But when you got kids, now childcare and groceries and all these other things wherever you're at have to be set up of the resource you need available to you on location. So it adds complication to that as a life.
Right. And I think with homesteaders, it might be, maybe I'm just saying that because I'm on the other side of the fence, but it feels like it might be a little more simple. And I've also noticed that, at least in the United States, we have a tendency to value homesteading more than being lifestylers. We get a lot of propaganda and a lot of encouragement to be lifestylers in commercials because, people are trying to sell products and they're trying to show a glamorous life. And usually lifestyling is more glamorous. But really, if people find out what you're spending your money on and it's not things that have resale value, most people will feel like that is not a good that's not a good place to invest your money because it's not an investment as far as they're concerned. So we get a lot of messaging from the world that homesteading is the smart thing to do. Whereas lifestyling, that you only get to do that later. You get to do that after you've established yourself, after maybe you have a little bit of money in the bank, once your mortgage is paid off, once you've raised your kids. Then maybe in the golden years, that's when you can go lifestyle. And so, like you said, it's a season of life because a lot of people wait until they're in their 50s, 60s to start lifestyling. And I think that's the template put in front of us, but I don't think that that's everybody's natural tendency. And so I think just knowing that about yourself gives you some permission to pursue being more of a lifestyler. And there are some major benefits that come along with that. If we won the game of life at the end of our lives by the possessions we have, then being a homesteader would always be the right investment. But we don't necessarily measure our lives by our possessions at the end. We measure our lives also by our experiences. And so I believe that both perspectives, both ways that we can be are equally valid. Because our experiences are most of the time, it's what at the end of our life we're very happy with having accomplished. We did a lot. We didn't waste our time. With homesteading, that's a perfectly valid way of going too. You at the end of your life might not want to have done a lot of travel. Maybe what you wanted was to be of service to your children and maybe your grandchildren. And you feel good because you were able to be a source of, home for them and a safety net for them. And that's what being a homesteader was able to provide. So I think one piece of when you came up with this model, Joel, and shared it with me, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was that we might not give ourselves permission to naturally gravitate towards lifestyler because we get a lot of messages that we're not supposed to do that unless we have our homesteader piece set first. And I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that.
Well, I would say the challenge comes in probably, if you're listening and you're in a marriage or a relationship and you are, let's say you're the lifestyler in the relationship and your spouse is the homesteader, most people around you are going to support your spouse's perspective. So your conflict arises and all of a sudden now they're like, well, I look around and all my friends are homesteading. They all have houses and mortgages and have stable environments. And they're like, but I want to go do fun stuff. I don't want to just do this all my life. Well, we can do that later. But right now, this is the sober-minded thing to do. Look at society. It's saying this is the way we're supposed to be doing this right now. Everybody supports the way I see this. And so I think the lifestyler might feel left out because society supports this so much, especially if your spouse or your lover or your relationship partner sees it on the other end of the spectrum.
We didn't always start out with, plenty of money in the bank or anything. We started our business many years ago, and it's only, in recent years started to do better. But we still live in we live in an apartment. It's not very fancy. It's just like a basic average apartment. And we could probably afford a better place to live, but we have chosen the last couple of years to invest our money in experiences. And so, I mean, if you looked at what we have, it's not a showpiece. Like where we live is not a showpiece at all. It's just a really simple place. It's very simple, but it takes care of our needs for the most part. Like I said, I've been kind of thinking maybe we need to, I mean, the boys are getting bigger. Actually, honestly, I think it's because all the kids are getting bigger. They're just physically taking up more space. They're just like the mass is increasing.
Their stuff's getting bigger too.
Yeah, their stuff's getting bigger. They're getting bigger. So I'm starting to think maybe we do need a little bit more room because our place is not very big at all. It's a pretty modest apartment. It's big enough. It's been big enough, but I think it's time to graduate to the next piece. However, if it wasn't for that, I would have no problem staying here. And there's nothing ostentatious about it, but I would much rather throw that money towards experiences. And I have had feedback that that's not necessarily the smart choice to make. Like we should be buying a house and we should be investing. You and I have both been homeowners in the past. Fortunately, we're out of that. Like we've both sold our houses and
Yeah.
we don't have to deal with that. And we're looking for a new place now. And we're getting a lot of encouragement to buy. And both of us are like, I don't know, man. You know, I don't
Put down roots, build equity,
Yeah.
create a homestead.
Yes. And I'm just like, I don't know if I want to buy. And it makes it more complicated, honestly, to find the kind of home we want in the price range we want it. Most people start buying at that, at that level. And so it's hard to find a place that would, meet our needs. And so we've actually had to do extra. I mean, I would say that we've been house hunting for a house to rent for probably about a year now because we're waiting for the right place to come along. But that's worth it to us because we want to keep lifestyling. And I think that that's perfectly valid. And at the same time, if somebody did want to buy and make sure they had that equity, I think that's perfectly valid as well. So again, it's a matter of recognizing where you're at and recognizing the needs that your spouse has and them recognizing the need that you have and making sure that people are getting these intrinsic needs met. Because I do think that lifestylers have an intrinsic need to experience. I don't think that that's just, if this model is accurate, the lifestyler has as much of an intrinsic need to have experiences as the homesteader has to put down roots. And we all kind of get the homesteader perspective, but we feel that the lifestyler perspective is not as valid. And I would argue that they're equally valid. So if you are in a relationship where you're a homesteader and your spouse is a lifestyler, I recommend that you open up your frame enough to recognize that they might have some needs like that are just as important to them as your need for nesting is to you. And you might feel like it's not a smart use of money, but there's not just money in the world. There's also time. And time is possibly one of the most important resources we have. If not, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most important resource. And so since time is also how we measure our life, not just the things we accumulate, not just the money that we are able to accumulate. But if time is a major piece and experiences are tied to time, then I recommend you open up your frame to recognize that they are more focused on how they're using their time. They're more focused on how much they're getting out of life in general. And that's a valid way of looking at things. And so just have conversations. If you're in a relationship and you recognize that you each are on two sides of this polarity, have an open discourse and conversation around making sure that both people are getting their needs met. And that's hard to do if there's a limited amount of resource. If there's a limited amount of money, that's hard to do. But usually both people can figure out ways to get your needs met without having to trample on each other's toes.
I think also the negative of these, like the downsides of these, it's easier to point, again, I think lifestyler people, this category that we came up with, the lifestyle people have a tendency to have illustrations of it going badly that homesteader people can point to. Oh, look at that couple. They had a little extra money. They got an RV and traveled the country. Now they're destitute. Now they're working at, a fast food restaurant trying to make ends meet because they blew out all their money traveling the country and having fun. They didn't save up anything, and now they've got nothing to show for it. And so we have these extreme examples that will often be pointed to as wasteful or whatever. And I would say there is an extreme. Obviously anything has the extreme on its side. There's also an extreme version of homesteading too. Now, I know this is like the example I'm going to give right now is a clinical diagnosed problem of people, but like the idea of hoarding, that's an actual issue people have now, like a medical issue or a psychological issue. but it is an extreme version of someone basically homesteading. They're putting so much effort into the things they own and the possessions they have and the place they live that it begins to own them to that level. And there's probably lower degrees of that. You're not necessarily at that level where you need help, but you tend to now, instead of, spending the time to go do something that will enrich your life or personal growth related, you invest it back into yet another piece of furniture for your house. And that's totally fine, obviously, whatever you want, but there are things that maybe you can do to branch out. So I think we don't see as many of the extreme examples on the homesteading side, because when they get really extreme, they're like hoarding. But we tend to overvalue the bad examples on the lifestyling side, and we tend to amp those up and like, oh, look at how bad that could be. You just spent this much money out to eat this. Now our whole budget's blown for the whole month, and so it can look bad really quick for people. And so I think that's just something else to keep in mind. None of this is like set in stone. You have to do this. I'm just saying these are things you can be thinking about. These are ways, if you and your spouse or you and your lover or you and your partner are talking and you're detailing out how you see these things, these are some things to think about and to bring up in that conversation.
I would also recommend that if you figure out where you fall on this sort of polarity or dichotomy or whatever you want to call it.
Spectrum.
The spectrum. That's a better word, spectrum. See if you can't dip your toe in the other side. There are definitely, when we get to the end of our lives, we haven't always set ourselves up financially for that. And as lifestylers, you and I need to be more conscientious about that, because we don't want to be a strain on our children. We don't want to have to, we don't want to become a problem for anyone. And so as lifestylers, one thing that we need to always kind of keep in the back of our mind is that we also have to put away, a fund, or we have to put aside assets or investments or however we choose to go about it, so that we have taken care of ourselves at the end of our lives without having to be a burden to others. And so we can't 100% go towards lifestyle. We have to have the sort of the yin yang of making sure that we also are taking care of the financial piece in behalf of our loved ones. By the same token, if you're a homesteader, I recommend you kind of dip your toe over into the lifestyle piece. At the end of your life, there will be a moment when you think, what have I done with my time? And was I able to do everything I wanted to do? And the lifestyle piece is what allows you to have that full, rich spectrum of experiences that will make you feel like maybe you capitalized on your life, like you really spent your time well, and you didn't just continue to pour it into something that you actually can't take with you. So regardless of which side of the spectrum you fall, my recommendation is that you sort of look at the other side and go, how can I make sure that I'm not losing that piece of it? Because there are definitely major advantages to both sides of the aisle.
So the other thing about lifestyling too, I just want to make this point, is that it's not always about having fun. It's not about like having big vacations and living on the road and working off of a laptop. Coming under the lifestyling part of it is also personal growth resources, like spending time learning a new skill, maybe a new language, maybe going and experiencing a different culture, traveling for a purpose, even doing a service project overseas could be a lifestyle type decision. You and your family want to go serve, maybe go to Haiti and volunteer, or in other words, there's other things that lifestyle comes into. It's not just about, oh yeah, let's go have fun all the time. Lifestyling is literally a lifestyle. It's not fun style. We're not calling it fun styling. We're calling it lifestyling. It's about building the experiential life you want. And I think there's often times when we forget that. And so again, your spouse comes to you and says, hey, I want to invest $500 in this new personal development course. And you're like, we can't afford that. If we're going to spend that much money, let's put it toward our mortgage. Well, you got to remember that might be a lifestyle decision to learn that new personal growth course or take that foreign language course. That's part of that lifestyle experience as well. It's not just about having fun. I think that's important to make that point.
Absolutely. Well, just to make that fair, if you can't afford to spend $500 on a course, but you're a lifestyler, and that really should be going towards your mortgage, then the recommendation is also to listen to your spouse on that. So we keep using the word discretionary time and discretionary money, and that's on purpose. We're talking about the extras at the end. And if we're fortunate enough to have extras at the end of, with time and with money, then I think that's really where the conversations come in. And fundamentally, I think the other piece of it that's kind of complicated is if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, homesteaders are usually the ones handling the lower needs. They're handling safety and security. and they're handling love and belongingness. And frequently, lifestylers are more at the top end of the spectrum. They're more looking at things like self-esteem and self-actualization. And so with lifestylers, there is a bit of a concept around having those basement needs met already. Now, what I've noticed with a lot of lifestylers that are not wealthy is that they learn to feel safe and secure with very little. Like they don't need a lot to feel safe and secure. And oftentimes that's where the conversation between spouses comes in. And by the way, if you've never heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have podcasts on it and articles on it on the website, on the Personality Hacker website. And then, just you can Google it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and get familiar with it. But for those of you who are familiar with the model, I'm just going to assume everybody is and just talk as if you are. One of the big conversation pieces that happens between lifestylers and homesteaders is that the definition or what is required to feel safe and secure is usually quite different. Lifestylers need a lot less to feel their safety and security needs met, and homesteaders oftentimes need a little bit more. And so really the conversation should be around, how do we make sure both people feel those needs are being met?
Safety and security.
That need of safety and security, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you're having the conversation, make sure that that's really the relevant piece. And ask yourself the very pointed question, what exactly do you need to feel safe and secure? And if you're the homesteader, like Joel, you mentioned, when it goes to the very extreme side, it's oftentimes, it's typified by hoarding. The people who hoard have a pathology around needing a lot to feel safe and secure. Like their safety and security needs might not ever be met.
It's unsatiated. It's like you can't get it satisfied at all.
Exactly. It's like an endless black hole. Whereas a lifestyler may need so little to feel their safety and security needs are met that they might hamstring themselves or even sabotage themselves. They might have sated that synthetically so that they spend time and money they can't afford. And then later on, now they have to pay the piper, right? Like now their safety and security needs are truly destabilized, maybe even going down to the survival level. So self-diagnosing exactly how much you need to feel safe and secure and recognizing whether or not your need is unrealistic. You might need too little and to a place where you might sabotage yourself, or you might need too much to a place where you're also sabotaging yourself just in another way. And getting a really balanced perspective on that, really understanding that piece and getting a balanced perspective on what will help that need feel met, and then asking each other what exactly that is for each other in say a relationship. I think that that's really where the conversation truly lands, and you'll have the highest leverage conversation around this.
So I'm going to tell you as a lifestyler, if you're listening and you're a lifestyler, I'm going to share a secret with you of how I think about this. If you're a homesteader, just close your ears real quick while I share this. Or you can eavesdrop. Go ahead and eavesdrop, because this will help you relate to your lifestyle in your life. So you realize as a lifestyler that time is linear, and time is the resource that will run out more than anything else. Like that is so visceral to you as a lifestyle. If you're really on that extreme end, you realize that you have this awareness, I will die someday. Like on a long enough timeline, all of our survival rates drop to 0. So I'm going to die at some unknown date in the future. X marks the spot of the future. So I've got so much time to experience life, and time is linear. I can't just generate more time between now and the time I die. It's going to happen. Time keeps running, the clock keeps going, and it's going to run out someday. And so it's linear, and you realize that, and it's very visceral for you to understand that. And oftentimes what the frustration comes down to is being a lifestyler, you also see the homestead end of like money creation, for example, as also a linear thing. Like I work so many hours because your brain's already wired this way, and I make so much money. And then if you're a salaried position, if you work at a company where you're getting a salary, you've distanced yourself a little bit from that. It's not so much based on your hours, but you still have to put days in and years in to make that salary back. You got to put effort in on a timeline. You can't just not show up for work. And then eventually you go into contract work, and maybe you can flex the time a little bit. And then maybe someday you own your own business or become an investor. And we did a whole podcast around this on the cash flow quadrant. So if you want to go look up what I'm talking about in the slight model here, go look up the cash flow quadrant. It details out basically what I'm talking about right now. It's one of our podcasts over at personalityhacker.com. But the idea for you as a lifestyle, the best thing you can do is to wire your brain to see generation of resource as outside the bounds of time. Make it asynchronous. Make it non-linear, because time is linear and that's never going to change. But the creation of value, possessions, money, the things you generate in life, those can be asynchronous. Those can be non-linear. And if you really want to live a lifestyling life and have that as your experience, then you're going to need to reframe how you see the creation of value away from a one-to-one hour for money framework and move up the ladder of distancing yourself from I work 1 hour, I get this much money, to where maybe I invest in this business and I get this return, or I have this project I'm working on, it's going to pay me this much. So it's asynchronous, it's nonlinear. And now that frees you up to be able to experience life in that lifestyle ability. And also, if you can generate that, you can generate enough to help satisfy the homesteader in your life and have the lifestyling experiences. So for you as the lifestyle listening, this is what I'd really encourage you to do. Go listen to the Cash Flow Quadrant. That might give you some ideas on this. And then we'll keep talking about these kind of concepts here at personalityhacker.com. But just try to rewire that part of your brain from that linear perspective that you're so naturally wired with the lifestyling into an asynchronous or nonlinear mindset around value creation, because that can be completely detached from the actual time it takes.
Yeah. And so then you generate enough resource to be able to have your time resource recouped, as well as enough for saving for the future, and like you said, for homesteading as well. I think it's good if homesteaders eavesdrops on that. All
right, you can unplug your ears now, homesteader.
No, I mean, like, obviously homesteaders want the same thing.
I'm obviously being hyperbolic.
I know. But I'm just saying, like, for everybody, that's like a good piece of advice. But yeah, I think it's important to recognize that we've been giving these templates for how reality is supposed to work. I think we mention this every podcast, but we get these templates for how reality is supposed to work, and they don't quite fit. And so it's good to understand these different maps and models, because then you can start to tailor your world to yourself. And if you recognize that you're either a homesteader or a lifestyler, and for some reason the way that the world's template has been set up is not accommodating those needs, then start tailoring your world to yourself and make sure you get those needs met.
And if you're in a fight with the person you're in a relationship with, bring this little framework, this little model to the conversation and say, hey, I might know what's going on here. I think you see it this way as a homesteader. I think I might see it as a lifestyler. Are there ways we can compromise and work on these values that we share, or that we have that are different, and bring some sharing into these? I think that would really help some conflict in your life as well. So
yeah, totally. Well, and also, I mean, I'm going to just repeat the point that I made before. Most of the arguments around money are not around money. They're around safety and security needs.
That's correct.
And if you notice on Maslow's hierarchy, safety and security is a foundational need before love and belongingness. So people who have a lot of fights in their marriage or in their pair bond relationship, it's oftentimes because they have a lower need going unmet, and it's usually safety and security, which is why we fight about money. And being able to have a conversation around what are your specific safety and security needs, and bringing in a model like homesteading versus lifestyling, and recognizing that people are just wired to have different levels of need there too, sometimes just really lubricates that conversation. It makes it so much easier to see the perspective of the other person, and to actually, not just diagnose the problem, but now make some prescription in the relationship. And then now that you know how to get everybody's safety and security needs met, now you can work on the love and belongingness and reconnect as people.
Are you a lifestyler? Are you a homesteader? Which one do you lean more toward? Which one does your partner or spouse lean toward? Maybe the people in your life. How do you show up with this? What are some of the things that have come up for you? We'd love to hear your story about how this shows up in your life. Now you've got this little framework in your head. Go over to personalityhacker.com and leave a comment right below this podcast episode and let us know your story and your feedback. We want to hear back from you and engage with you on the website.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can leave a rating and review for us on iTunes. It helps a lot.
Also, join our community of like minds growing every day, or at facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Can't wait to talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.